You know what's worse than being lied to? Being turned into someone else's lie without knowing it. I thought I was starting fresh in Manila. New country, new woman, new chance at happiness after my divorce back in Portland. But Corazon wasn't just playing me for a fool. She was using me as a prop in someone else's marriage. And the scariest part? For 3 months I actually believed I was her husband. I introduced myself to her neighbors that way. I signed documents that way. I even argued with her mother about money, as her husband. The whole time her real husband was sleeping in the next room, and I thought he was just her cousin who helped with rent. If our stories resonate with you, don't forget to like, comment, and tell us where you're watching from. This story was shared with us by a longtime subscriber who moved to the Philippines in 2023. He asked us to change some details for privacy, but wanted other expats to hear his warning. I landed at Ninoy Aquino Airport in October 2023 with 2 suitcases and fresh divorce papers. At 58, I was done with American women and their endless demands. My ex-wife had taken half my retirement. I needed somewhere my money actually meant something. The plan was simple. Stretch what I had left. Maybe find someone who actually appreciated a decent man for once. I wasn't looking for a maid or a trophy wife. I just wanted someone real. Corazon walked into that Makati coffee shop like she owned the place. Restaurant manager, fluent English, owned her apartment. When she told me she'd been single for 2 years after a bad relationship, I thought I'd hit the lottery. She wasn't desperate or clingy like the bar girls I'd heard about. She had her own life, her own money. I don't usually date foreigners, she said on our 3rd date, reaching across to touch my hand. But you're different, Bennett. You're not. Like the other American men who come here looking for maids or other things. 2 weeks later, we were inseparable. The chemistry was incredible. She cooked for me. We talked for hours about everything. She introduced me to her friends as her boyfriend. For the first time since my divorce, I actually felt alive again. I want you to meet my family, she said one night, lying in my hotel bed. My mother especially. She's very traditional, so I'll need to be careful about how I introduce you. I was already thinking marriage proposals and visa paperwork. Within a month, I was practically living at her place in Quezon City. It was a nice 2-bedroom apartment, much better than my hotel room. She mentioned having a cousin named Miguel who helped with rent, slept in the back room, worked construction. Family is everything here, she explained when I asked about the arrangement. We help each other. I respected that. Coming from Portland, where nobody even talks to their neighbors, I found it refreshing. Miguel was quiet, maybe 35, kept to himself. We'd nod when we passed in the hallway. He was gone most days, back late at night. Perfect roommate, honestly. Corazon started calling me her husband around the apartment complex. At first, I laughed it off. We're not married yet, I'd tell her. In my heart, we are, she'd say, kissing my neck. Why make it complicated with papers? The way she said it made me feel special, like our connection was deeper than legal documents. I started thinking maybe she was right. Maybe love was more important than bureaucracy. Corazon's mother visited on a Sunday. I was nervous, wanted to make a good impression on the woman who might become my mother-in-law. Corazon coached me beforehand. Just be yourself, Bennett. And if she asks about our relationship, we've been married 6 months. She's very religious, won't approve of us living together otherwise. I hesitated. Isn't that lying? It's protecting her feelings, Corazon said, straightening my shirt. We will be married soon anyway, right? When her mother arrived, Corazon introduced me in rapid Tagalog, then switched to English. Mama, this is my husband, Bennett. Her mother hugged me warmly, called me anak, son. I felt guilty about the lie, but the acceptance was intoxicating. My ex-mother-in-law had barely tolerated me for 15 years. We had lunch together, and her mother asked about our wedding, our plans for children. Corazon fielded the questions smoothly, squeezing my hand under the table whenever I looked, uncertain. She loves you already, Corazon whispered later as we walked her mother to the jeepney stop. See how easy it is when everyone is happy? The lie had felt natural by the end of the visit. Maybe too natural. 2 months in, Corazon needed help with business documents. Her restaurant was expanding, she said, and needed a foreign investor signature for some permits. Just routine paperwork, she assured me, spreading the documents across the kitchen table. Miguel can witness the signatures. The papers were in mixed English and Tagalog, something about property leases, business partnerships. I skimmed them, but it was mostly legal jargon I didn't understand. Where do I sign? I asked. She pointed to several lines marked with yellow sticky notes. Right here as my business partner, and here, she hesitated, as my husband. Corazon, we're not actually... It's just for the permits, love. Filipino bureaucracy is crazy. Foreign spouses get better business rates. Miguel watched silently from across the table, sipping his coffee. Something in his expression bothered me, but I couldn't place what it was. He looked worried, guilty. I signed where she pointed. What was the worst that could happen? A month later, we were invited to a neighbor's wedding. I wore my only decent shirt, feeling proud to have Corazon on my arm. Mr. and Mrs. Santos, the bride's mother, greeted us at the reception. Santos, that was Corazon's last name. I started to correct her, but Corazon squeezed my arm tight. Thank you for inviting us, Corazon responded smoothly. Throughout the reception, people congratulated us on our own marriage. An older man asked how long we'd been married. 8 months, I heard myself saying. The lie came out automatically like I'd been practicing it. Later, as we danced to a slow song, I asked Corazon about it. It's easier than explaining our situation, she said. People here are traditional. They expect couples living together to be married. But something felt wrong. The way she'd answered so quickly about 8 months, like she'd practiced that specific time frame. And why 8 months? We'd only known each other for 3. Unless she was counting from some other starting point I didn't know about. Miguel and Corazon had a heated argument in Tagalog one evening. I was in the living room watching TV, but their voices carried from the kitchen. I caught a few English words scattered through their rapid conversation. Money, dangerous, stop. When Corazon came back to the living room, she looked upset. What was that about? I asked. Miguel thinks I'm spending too much money on the restaurant expansion. He doesn't understand business investments. Maybe I should talk to him man to man, explain that we know what we're doing. Her reaction was sharp, almost panicked. No, Bennett, no, he's jealous of what we have. Best to leave him alone. That night she was distant. When I tried to initiate sex, she pushed me away gently. I'm tired, love. Maybe tomorrow. But she didn't sleep. I could feel her lying awake next to me, tense as a wire. Around 3 a.m. I got up to get some water. The apartment was dark, but I heard quiet voices coming from Miguel's room. A woman's voice mixed with his deeper one, Corazon's voice. I stood in the hallway listening. They were speaking Tagalog, but the tone was intimate, concerned, like a married couple discussing serious problems. My stomach dropped, but I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was just checking on him, making sure he was okay after their argument. When I got back to bed, Corazon was there, pretending to sleep. The next morning, Corazon got a phone call during breakfast. She stepped onto the balcony to answer, speaking rapid Tagalog. Through the glass door, I watched her face go pale. When she came back inside, her hands were shaking slightly. I need to go to the restaurant early today. Emergency with the suppliers. After she left, Miguel emerged from his room. We were alone for the first time in weeks. Bennett, he said quietly, his English suddenly much clearer than I'd ever heard it. We need to talk. About what? He looked terrified, like a man about to confess to murder. About Corazon, about this whole situation. What situation? You don't know, do you? He sat down heavily at the kitchen table. Jesus Christ, you really don't know. My heart started pounding. Know what, Miguel? She's my wife, Bennett. Corazon is my wife. We've been married for 3 years. The world stopped spinning. Everything went silent except for the sound of blood rushing in my ears. That's impossible. You're her cousin. No, man, I'm her husband, and you... He looked sick to his stomach. You're helping her commit immigration fraud. I couldn't breathe. I sat down hard in the chair across from Miguel, staring. at his face, looking for any sign that this was some kind of sick joke. "You're lying. She would have told me. We're together. She loves me. Look around, Bennett. Really look." For the first time, I actually saw what was in front of me. The wedding photo on the bookshelf. I'd assumed it was from a family member's wedding. Never looked closely. But there was Corazon in a white dress, standing next to Miguel in a traditional Barong Tagalog. They were both younger, both smiling, both wearing wedding rings. That's not 3 years ago, our wedding day. I started noticing other things, details that should have been obvious. The way Miguel knew where everything was in the kitchen, how he had his own keys to the apartment, why he was always there but never brought women over. The comfortable way, he moved through the space like he'd lived there for years, because he had. But the papers I signed, immigration documents, sponsorship papers. She's been telling the government you're her husband so she can apply for family reunification. Visas. For her whole family. My hands were shaking now. Why are you telling me this? Why now? Because yesterday immigration called. They want to interview both of you, together, as husband and wife. The room started spinning. Interview? Bennett, if they find out this is fraud, you'll go to prison. In the Philippines. And me, if they discover I'm really her husband, he put his head in his hands, they'll deport my whole family. But you could have stopped this months ago. I tried. That argument you heard last night? I was begging her to tell you the truth. But the money you've been giving her, it's keeping my mother's cancer treatments going. My sister's university fees. If Corazon loses you, I felt like I was drowning. How much money? The restaurant investments, the business permits. Bennett, there is no restaurant expansion. She's been sending everything to my family in the provinces. The $15,000 I'd given her over 3 months, all of it gone. Where is she now? Meeting with an immigration lawyer, trying to figure out how to coach you for the interview without you finding out the truth. I stood up, pacing around the small kitchen. This is insane. I need to leave right now. Pack my bags and get out of the country. You can't just leave. If you disappear before the interview, they'll issue a warrant for both of you. When Corazon came home that evening, I was waiting in the living room. Miguel had locked himself in his room. Their room, I realized now. "How was your day, love?" she asked, bending down to kiss my forehead like nothing in the world had changed. Miguel told me. She froze halfway to the kitchen, her whole body going rigid. Told you what? Everything. The marriage, the fraud, the interview. For a moment, she looked like she might try to deny it, keep up the charade. Then her shoulders sagged like someone had cut the strings holding her up. "Bennett, I can explain." "Explain what? That you've been lying to me for 3 months? That you're married to another man? That I'm facing prison time for something I didn't even know I was doing? It wasn't supposed to go this far." She sat down on the couch, suddenly looking exhausted. "It started as just a small thing. You were lonely when you arrived. I needed help with some paperwork." "Paperwork? Corazon, I signed sponsorship documents. I told immigration officers I was your husband. I was going to tell you, but then you were so happy here, and Miguel's mother got diagnosed with cancer, and my sister needed money for school. Fees. So you decided to destroy my life instead of finding another way?" She started crying. Real tears, not the manipulative kind I'd seen her use on her mother. "I never meant for you to get hurt. The interview. Maybe we can still make it work. I can coach you, teach you what to say about our relationship. Are you completely insane? I'm not going to sit through a fraudulent government interview. Bennett, please. If you don't show up, they'll investigate everything. You'll be in more trouble than if you just go through with it." Miguel emerged from his room. "She's right, Bennett. Running now makes it worse." I looked at both of them, this married couple who had made me an unwitting accomplice in their crime. "How long were you planning to keep this up? Forever?" Corazon wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Just until the visas come through. For my family. Then we could figure something out. Figure something out. I'm not a character in your fake marriage. I'm a real person whose life you've completely destroyed." The absurdity of it all hit me like a truck. I'd been living with a married couple for 3 months, thinking I was the husband, thinking I was building something real with this woman, thinking I'd finally found happiness after my divorce. It was all a lie, every single moment of it. 3 days later, I found myself sitting in the Bureau of Immigration office in Manila, sweating through my best shirt. Corazon sat next to me, holding my hand like we were actually a loving married couple about to be approved for family reunification. The interviewer was a stern-looking woman in her 50s who had clearly been doing this job long enough to spot every kind of fraud imaginable. "Mr. Bennett Santos," she began, consulting her paperwork. The fake name sounded completely ridiculous, coming out of her mouth. I wanted to stand up and tell her my real name, explain the whole situation, but Corazon's grip on my hand tightened like a warning. "How long have you been married to Corazon?" 10 months, I said, reciting the lie Corazon had coached me to tell. "Where did you meet?" "At a coffee shop in Makati." The questions started simple enough. Our anniversary date, which I got right because Corazon had drilled it into me. Where we went on our honeymoon. Palawan, she'd said, even though we'd never been there. What side of the bed I slept on, the right side. Then they got harder. "What was your wife wearing when you first met?" I remembered exactly. A blue dress with small white flowers, but Corazon had told me to say red during our coaching session. I hesitated, torn between the truth and the lie. "Blue," I said finally, going with what I actually remembered. The interviewer made a note. "Mrs. Santos, what was your husband wearing when you first met?" "A white polo shirt," Corazon answered confidently. I had been wearing a grey t-shirt. The interviewer's pen scratched against the paper as she noted our contradictory answers. "Mr. Santos, what's your wife's middle name?" I didn't know. In all our months together, Corazon had never told me her middle name. We stared at each other across the table, both knowing I was about to guess wrong. "Elena," I said desperately. "It's Maria," the interviewer said, her voice getting colder. The questions continued, and we failed every single one. Our wedding date, I gave the wrong month. Her favorite food, I said sinigang, but she had apparently told them adobo in her paperwork. Whether we wanted children, I said yes, because what man wouldn't want children with his wife? But she had said no in her documentation. We were failing spectacularly, and there was nothing either of us could do to stop it. "Mr. Santos, what's your wife's maiden name?" Complete blank. Total emptiness in my brain. I realized I had no idea what Corazon's life had been like before she met me. I knew nothing real about her at all. Corazon has always been Santos to me. The interviewer closed her folder with a sharp snap. "Mr. and Mrs. Santos, thank you for your time. We'll be in touch regarding our decision." Outside the building, standing in the oppressive Manila heat, Corazon was hyperventilating. "That was a complete disaster," she whispered, leaning against a concrete wall. "What happens now?" "They investigate everything. Check our documentation. Interview neighbors, maybe visit the apartment. They'll find Miguel." "Yes." We stood there in the sweltering heat, both knowing it was over. Back at the apartment, Miguel was already packing his belongings into a single duffel bag. "I heard from my friend who works at immigration," he said, without looking up from his clothes. "They're opening a formal investigation. I need to disappear for a while." "Where will you go?" I asked, though I wasn't sure why I cared anymore. "My brother's place in Cebu, until this whole thing blows over." Corazon sat down heavily on what I now realized had always been their marriage bed and stared at the wall. "How did we ever think this would work?" she asked nobody in particular. "You thought it would work because you never told me the truth," I said. "I couldn't have helped you make better decisions if I didn't know what decisions we were actually making." Over the next week, everything fell apart like a house of cards in an earthquake. Immigration officers visited the apartment twice, asking detailed questions about our living arrangements. Neighbors were questioned about how long Miguel and I had both been living there. The landlord, when pressed, admitted that Miguel and Corazon had signed the original lease as husband and wife 2 years ago. My business investments were frozen pending the investigation. The restaurant where Corazon claimed to be a manager. When I finally went there myself, I discovered she was just a part-time server who worked maybe 3 shifts a week. "I do manage some shifts sometimes," she said weakly when I confronted her about it, "when the real manager isn't there." Everything had been a lie. Her job, her education level, her single status, her feelings for me. Every single thing she told me about herself was fiction. "Did any of it mean anything to you?" I asked her one night as we lay in bed together for what I knew would be the last time. "Yes," she said quietly. "The part where you made me feel like someone worth loving, like someone who deserved good things, but not worth being honest with. Bennett, you have to understand. People like me, we don't get chances like you represent. We take what we can get and try to make it work somehow. By destroying other people's lives? By surviving the only way we know how." I couldn't argue with that logic, but I couldn't forgive it either. Survival and destruction weren't mutually exclusive, apparently. My lawyer, an expensive Filipino attorney who spoke to me like I was a particularly slow child who had wandered into his office by mistake, explained my legal situation with brutal honesty. "Mr. Peterson," he insisted on using my real name, which somehow made everything feel more serious, "you're facing charges of immigration fraud, document falsification, and conspiracy to commit visa fraud." "But I didn't know what I was doing," I protested. "That's debatable. You signed multiple official documents identifying yourself as Mrs. Reyes's husband. Corazon's real last name was Reyes, not Santos. Even that detail had been a lie. The prosecution will argue that no reasonable person signs legal documents without understanding what they're signing, especially immigration sponsorship papers. What's the worst-case scenario? 5 years in a Filipino prison, permanent deportation ban from the Philippines, and you'll be financially responsible for all court costs and administrative fees associated with the investigation. The best-case scenario? A plea bargain that would reduce the charges to fines, immediate deportation, and a 10-year ban on returning to the Philippines. What about Corazon and Miguel? Mrs. Reyes will likely face similar charges, but as a Filipino citizen, she won't be deported. Mr. Reyes, if they can prove he was aware of the fraud and participated in it, he could face criminal conspiracy charges as well. I thought about Miguel packing his single bag, fleeing to Cebu to hide with his brother. He had known this day would come eventually. The lawyer slid a set of papers across his polished wooden desk. "This is a plea agreement. You admit to unknowingly participating in document fraud, pay a $50,000 fine, accept immediate deportation, and agree to the 10-year entry ban." $50,000? That was almost everything I had left after Corazon's investments. "It's significantly better than 5 years in prison, Mr. Peterson." I stared at the papers, thinking about signing my name to one more legal document. Except this time I actually understood exactly what I was agreeing to. What happens if I decide to fight the charges? You'll lose. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and fighting it means staying in the Philippines during the entire trial process, which could take several years. Several years in legal limbo, burning through what remained of my savings, facing the possibility of prison time at the end of it all. I need some time to think about this. You have 48 hours before this offer expires. I found Corazon at her actual workplace, a small cramped restaurant in Quezon City, where she worked as a server, not the manager of an expanding business empire. She looked genuinely surprised to see me walk through the door. "Bennett, how did you find me here? Your lawyer gave me the address." We sat in a corner booth away from the other customers. She ordered coffee for both of us, a habit from our early dating days that now felt completely surreal. "I'm taking the plea deal," I told her directly. She nodded slowly. "That's probably smart. I'll be deported next week." "I know." We sat in silence for several minutes, watching other customers eat their meals and laugh with their friends and live their normal, uncomplicated lives. "Do you regret it?" I asked finally. "Which part?" "Any of it. All of it. Meeting me. The lies, this whole insane situation." She thought for a long time before answering. "I regret hurting you. I regret that it had to end this way. But I don't regret trying to help my family survive. Even if it meant completely destroying mine? Your family was already destroyed, Bennett. That's why you came here in the first place. She wasn't wrong. I had come to the Philippines running, away from one kind of pain, only to find a completely different kind. Will you and Miguel be okay? He's filing for divorce, claims he didn't know anything about the fraud, that I did it all without his knowledge or consent. Will that defense work for him? Maybe. Probably. Miguel has always been smarter than both of us combined. The coffee tasted bitter and cold. Everything tasted bitter now. I want you to know, I said, the feelings I had for you were completely real. Whatever else was fake between us, that part wasn't. I know, she said softly. Mine were real too. I believed her, which somehow made everything hurt even worse. I'm writing this from a hotel room in Portland, 3 weeks after my deportation. From the Philippines. The Oregon rain feels like punishment after months of tropical heat and humidity. My bank account is $50,000 lighter than when I started this adventure. My pride is completely gone. I have a 10-year ban from returning to the Philippines, which honestly feels more like protection from my own stupidity than punishment. The worst part isn't the money I lost or the legal trouble I went through. It's the lingering question that keeps me awake at night. How did I not see what was right in front of me? Looking back now, the signs were everywhere. Miguel's easy familiarity with the apartment layout, Corazon's practiced responses to questions about our marriage, the way she introduced me as her husband to people before I was emotionally ready for that kind of commitment, the wedding photo I never looked at closely, the intimate late-night conversations between them that I rationalized away. I wanted to believe in the fantasy so desperately that I ignored obvious reality. My ex-wife calls me sometimes. She heard about what happened through our mutual friends back home. At least this one didn't take half your retirement in a divorce, she jokes, but not meanly. Just the other half, I reply. I'm seeing a therapist now, trying to understand how a reasonably intelligent person makes such spectacularly bad decisions. She says it's about loneliness, vulnerability, and the dangerous combination of wanting to believe in second chances while being afraid they don't really exist. Will you try dating again? She asks during our sessions. Maybe, probably, but definitely in America, and definitely with women who are actually single. Sometimes late at night, I wonder what would have happened if Corazon had just told me the truth from the very beginning. Would I have helped her family anyway? Would we have found some legal way to support Miguel's medical expenses and his sister's education? Would we have built something real together based on honesty instead of lies? I'll never know the answer to those questions. If you're an older Western man thinking about starting over fresh in Southeast Asia, please learn from my catastrophic mistake. It's not about avoiding foreign women or being paranoid about international relationships. It's about not being so desperate for human connection that you stop asking basic questions about the people you're trusting with your life. I never asked to see Corazon's identification documents, never verified her job or her actual living situation, never wondered why her cousin seemed so comfortable and familiar in her apartment, never questioned why she was so eager to introduce me as her husband to other people. I was so hungry for someone to love me, so desperate to feel wanted and needed again, that I swallowed every single lie she told me. The romance scam stories you hear about online, those are almost easier to spot when you know what to look for. At least the woman pretending to love you is obviously after your money for some fake emergency. But identity fraud? That's completely different and much more dangerous. Corazon didn't need me to send money to a sick relative or pay for a fake medical emergency. She needed me to be someone I wasn't, to sign legal papers, attend government interviews, become an unwitting accomplice in her criminal scheme. And the scariest part of this whole experience, I almost went along with it even after I discovered the truth, because admitting I'd been completely fooled meant admitting I'd been that lonely, that naive, that desperate for human connection. Pride makes you do incredibly stupid things, like sitting through a fraudulent immigration interview instead of just walking away from the whole situation. The Philippines is a beautiful country. Most of the people I met there, the ones who weren't actively scamming me, were genuinely kind and welcoming to foreigners. But if you go there emotionally broken and desperate for a fresh start, someone will absolutely take advantage of that vulnerability. That's guaranteed. Get your own emotional life together first. Deal with your divorce, your loneliness, your need to feel needed. Then, if you still want to date abroad, do it with your eyes wide open and your brain fully engaged. Don't let someone else's survival story become your complete destruction story. And if a woman introduces you as her husband to her family and neighbors before you're actually married, that's not romantic or culturally charming. That's a red flag the size of a billboard with flashing neon lights. I learned that lesson the hardest way possible, sitting in an immigration office in Manila, sweating through questions about a marriage that had never actually existed except in government paperwork. Don't be me.